Okay, so they don't tell us what f of x is. They don't tell us what g of x is. But they do give us bits of information that are enough to actually answer the question. So on the quiz, you had this exact same question. The only difference was they told you what f of x was. They're so like, here's f of x, here's g of x, and you use the power rule, you use the product rule, you use the quotient rule. Well, now there is no function. There's no f of x anywhere. F of x equals what? G of x equals what? I don't know. But they tell you pieces of information, enough information that you can answer the question. Okay, so what we have to do, h of x is a hybrid of two. If I add up f of x, so if I combine f of x with g of x, I get h of x. Okay, if I combine them by adding them together. So what they want me to do is they want me to find the derivative of h and then plug in 1. Okay, we've done that before. We've actually done that before. We've done sum and difference rule where we're adding things together. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Right, let's see. Right here. Right, sum and difference rule. We're adding two things up. We just find the derivative of one, find the derivative of the other, add them together. Okay, but the difference here was they told us what they were, right? They told us it was x cubed, 4x squared, negative 2x, positive 7. They told us all that, so we use the power rule. Well, now we don't have that, but we can still use the power rule. Okay, so let's go back to ours. So if I were to use, so the first thing I got to do is find h prime. That's the first thing I got to do. Because if I can't find h prime, how can I plug in 1? I can't plug in 1. Not going to happen. So how would I find, in words, how would I find h prime? What would I need to do to find the derivative of h? Don't even need to tell me anything here. What would I need to do? How would I find the derivative of h? What would I need to do? You guys did it on your quiz. Yeah, Donnie? I don't even need to use the definition. I can use, yeah. That would work. That would work. But even easier than that, I could use the power rule. I could use the power rule. And even easy, or so like I definitely would use the power rule. Roll first. Okay, 1. That's it. Okay, so yeah, so power rule definitely, right? But this guy right here, f of x plus g of x, two functions together. That looks exactly like this guy over here. Find the derivative of u plus v, right? And when we did that, we used the power rule. We used the power rule because I had the actual equation. I had the function. Here I don't. But what I did was I found the derivative of one, found the derivative of the other, either added them or subtracted them together. Okay, so let's do that. So what would be the derivative of f? Even easier than you're thinking, probably. Just f prime, yeah. That's it. That's all we can go for. It's just going to be f prime. And then what's the derivative of g prime? Or sorry, g. I just said it, g prime, right? There you go. That's the derivative. That's as far as we can go. We don't know any more information. Okay. So the derivative is done. We've actually found the derivative. The calculus is done. It was that easy, right? Now what they want us to do is they want us to plug in a value, 1. Okay, so I'm going to use what I came up with, and instead of x, I'm going to plug in a 1. That means plug in a 1 everywhere, right? Everywhere I see an x, I plug in a 1. That's what that means, right? If I had an equation, if I had f of x, if I had f of x equals, or f prime, sorry, if I had f prime of x equals x squared plus 2x minus 1, and I said, find f prime of 1, wouldn't you just plug in 1 everywhere you see an x? That's just what you would do, right? It's the same thing here. Plug in 1 everywhere you see an x. Okay, so now I'm looking for what happens if I plug in 1 to f prime. What happens if I plug in 1 to g prime? Well, I don't know. I don't have any equations to plug them in, but what I do have are answers. They've already told me solutions, and that's the table. Okay, so what we're going to look for, 2 things I need to look for: f prime of 1 and g prime of 1. Okay, so let's go to the table and let's look for those. So f prime is right here. 1 is right here. They meet at positive 1. So the answer to this here is positive 1. G prime is over here. Again, 1 is over here. Where do they meet? They meet right here at 2. G prime of 1 is positive 2. So now I just add them together. So h prime of 1 equals 3. Done. Okay.
Attention all teachers, please excuse the interruption. If you have any students in your class, quickly add their text, please delete them and send them over to the cafeteria, please. And if you have any students,
Anyone take the answer? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Tony. I'm going to post the notes on YouTube like I always do, so just watch them on your own. Okay. Take your notes with you. Okay, so that's it, right? So you're not going to have these big long equations today like we have in the past, right? Like this right here, right? Some of these ugly guys right here. But what we are going to have is you really got to know your properties. You have to know, not the properties, I should say, the rules. Sum and difference rule, product rule, quotient rule, okay? You have to know those, otherwise you're going to be stuck here. So it's really working on the rules, knowing the rules, okay? So let's look at the next one. Give that one a shot. See if you do that. I think table might be different. Table might be different. So always use the table they give you, because they might switch it up even though it looks the same. So this one is, instead of sum, it's difference, but it's exactly the same steps, right? To find h prime, you're just going to find the derivative of f, find the derivative of the g, and subtract them. Okay. Once we know the derivative, we're going to plug in our value, which is 2 this time. So we got f prime of 2 minus g prime of 2. f prime of 2 is 1/2. G prime of 2 is +1. So 1/2 minus 1 is -1/2. The slope at 2 for h is -1/2. Okay. So now let's look at this one here. So the main thing with these is going to be, what rule are we using? That's where we're going to start with this guy. So for this guy here, which rule are we using? Product rule. Yeah, product rule. Absolutely. So again, we don't know what f of x is and g of x is. We don't know what those are. Okay. It's not a big deal though. We know that the product rule says f of x times g prime plus g of x times f prime. Now they don't use, or they use f and g. They even happen to use f and g. So it's literally the same thing, right? So to find the derivative of h, I'm going to take the first term times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. That's the rule. That's what the rule says. And then you can put them in parentheses because we're going to do what's inside the parentheses or the brackets first before we add. Adding is the last thing we do. Okay, so now they want me to find h prime of 3. So everywhere I see an x, I plug in a 3. Okay. So I have a bunch of F3s, G prime 3s, G3s, G prime 3s. So to find those solutions, I go to the table. Okay. So I'm going to take note of everything that's on there and write it down. So F prime of 3, or sorry, just F of 3. Sorry, F of 3 is 3 times G prime of 3, -2. And then go to the next set of brackets, G of 3. G of 3, it looks like is, G of 3 is 1. Times F prime of 3, which is 2. You got -6 plus 2, which is -4. So h prime of 3 equals -4. So some of you I'm noticing are doing this, some of you aren't doing this. What I've noticed is when you're doing your work, either on, whether it's assignments or tests or quizzes, especially tests or quizzes where someone's actually reading it and grading it, make sure you're labeling everything. Make sure it's not just scratch paper. Scratch paper is different than test paper, right? A lot of you are, it's all over the place, right? And I don't know where to look, right? You have 3 things that are boxed. You have, so it's just it's hard to read. So what I'm looking for is I'm trying to find a process. So you see here, this is what it should look like, or something like this, where someone who's reading it, they know exactly what they did. Okay, they found the derivative of h, that's it. Then they plugged in 3, that's it. And then they found the values. And then at the end, isn't that what they were looking for right here? So there's a lot of you do this already. Some of you don't. It's kind of like everything's scratch paper. And anything you turn in is not scratch paper. Whatever you turn in is just your work. So it's the difference between scratch and your work. So if it's scratch, yeah, do whatever you want. But if you're, so just make sure that, so whoever's reading your paper, so even if it's not me on the AP test, it won't be me. They know exactly what you're doing, okay, what you're looking at, okay? Okay, so try that one. Try this one. Okay. So you set up, it's from it's one function minus another or divided by another function. That's quotient rule. So quotient rule says low derivative of the high minus high derivative of the low, all over the low squared. Okay. So then I plugged in 3, found the values for 3, simplified, done. -3/4. Okay. So it's exactly what you guys have been doing. The only difference is you really have to use the rules now. Okay. And there is no simplifying or anything like that. It's just plug in the values. Okay. Let's see here. We got time? Yeah, we got time. All right. So I want you to do these. Do these 5. Okay. Okay, so for the first one, A, I got 1/2. B, I got -2. C, I got +1. And D, I got -1/2. I haven't done E yet. Any questions on those? Mhm. C, sure. Let's see what I did for C. Okay, so for C, so C is F times G, right? So f of x times G prime plus F prime times G. And then they're looking for 4. So I plugged in 4. Let's see. F of 4 is 2. That's where I got that 2. G prime of 4 is 1. That's where I got that guy. G prime of, or F prime of 4, -1. And then G prime of 4 is 1. And then what? Oh, sorry, I did G prime twice, right? That was supposed to be G regular. So G regular 4 is 5. Yep. So the second is going to be -5, which makes this -3. Yep. That's letter C. Let me change that one. -3. So letter E. Letter E I haven't done yet because of a couple reasons. There's a first reason why it's squared. It looks different, right? Which rule would we use for that one? Well, that one has a power, right? Doesn't it have a power? So when we use power rule, yes, if it was just the power, yes, if it was, so if F prime or F was, if F of X was like X squared, sure, use the power rule, right? Or if it was -2x squared, sure, use the power rule. But we don't know if it has multiple terms, it's going to be different. Okay, we're going to use a different rule. We're actually going to use the chain rule, which we're not going to talk about today. We'll go over next week. Chain rule, we'll talk about next week. Okay, so we don't know that. Okay, so I don't know if it's just a one-term thing or if it's got multiple terms. I don't know. So if I don't know, the safe way is to just, let's see. So I have f of x squared. The safe way is to go f of x times itself and use the product rule. Okay. After next week, we'll just use chain rule. We'll go right to chain rule and use it, but we haven't learned that yet. So the safe way right now is product rule. Okay. So product rule, I'm finding, what was it? C prime. So it's really the same number multiplied twice. So C of 2, C prime of 2 we're looking for. So everywhere you're going to have a bunch of 2s. Okay. So f of 2 is +4. So this guy is going to be a +4. This guy is going to be a +4. F prime of 2 is -1. -1. -1. Okay. Multiply them together, add them together. So we get, what is that? -4 times -4, +16. Okay. Okay, so that's tables. So if they give you a table, That's what you're going to do. Number 6 is actually a table type question without a table. Okay, so a lot of times you look at a table, or a lot of times you look at a question like this, and you're like, okay, what do I do here? Anytime they give you something, so the first questions, the first things they're giving you here are, hey, f of -2 is -1. F of prime of 2 is negative or positive 6. That's like table information, right? So you can kind of make a table if you want. Sometimes it's helpful to make a table. Now this table is not going to be nearly as big, but it will be important. We could have f of x, f prime of x, make it a little neater. And then they say for -2, right? They say -2. So f of x, f of -2 is -1. F prime of -2 is positive 6. That's all they give us. It's important to have it information, because sometimes if you just leave it up there, you see it, but you don't know it exists. You don't know to use it. Well, if you make a table, then okay, now I can start to see what I need to do, or what I can start to see. F of -2 is -1. F prime of -2 is 6. Okay. Okay. So that's the first sentence. Let the function g of x equal. Okay. So let's write g of x down. Okay. That's g of x. So we got to write the equation of the tangent line to the graph where x equals -1. So the equation of a tangent line means an equation of a line. And then the word tangent means, what are we going to have to do? What are we going to have to do? Derivatives. Yeah, we're going to have to start with derivatives. That's what it means. Okay. So we're going to have to find derivative of g. Oops. G prime. Here's the question here. Which rule are we going to use? Power, product, or quotient? Which rule are we going to use here to find the derivative of g? It's actually going to be product. Yeah. X squared minus 2 is its own function. I can graph that function. It's a parabola. F of x is its own function. I have no idea what it is, but it's its own function, right? I can graph that function. When I'm multiplying two functions together, that's product rule. Okay. So let's set up product rule. Product rule says the first times the derivative of the second. So I have the first times the derivative of f, which is just f prime. Since I don't know what it is, I'm just going to leave it as f prime. Okay. And then we do the opposite. The derivative of the first, well, the derivative of the first is just going to be 2x. I can just use power rule for that one. And then at times f of x. As far as I can go. Okay, so you guys have kind of had this question in you've had it before, and you had it kind of on your quiz. I don't think it asked you for the equation, but I think it asked you for the slope, right? The slope is what we need next, right? For any equation, we need a slope. So slope at -2. So I plug in -2 like I've been doing, g prime of -2 okay. So everywhere I see an X, I got to plug in a -2. Okay. Okay. Well, the first guy here is just an actual function, so I can simplify that. The first one here, I could just simplify. -2 squared is 4, -2 is 2. So this guy here is just regular old 2. If I want to find out what this guy is, I got to go to my table. F prime of -2. That's +6. The next one, simplify this guy. That's just going to be -4. This guy, I'm going to need to go to the table. F of -2 is -1. Simplify. Got 12 plus a +4, sorry, which is +16. So G prime of 2 is +16. What did I find there? What is that? The slope. That's the slope. That's where you stopped on your quiz, right? But they want more, okay? They want the actual equation. All righty, so we know that's the slope. So I can label that. I'm going to label that just for my own benefit so I know that that's the slope. So it's going to be y minus y1 equals slope x minus x1. Well, I know the slope is already 16, so I'm already there. This is going to be my final answer right here. Missing a few pieces though. I'm missing a y point and an x point. I'm missing a y point and an x point. Do I have one of those? Which one do I have? I have -2, which is an x point. So -2 is going to go in there. So it's actually +2. How do I get my y? Very good. Plug it into the original equation. Well, the original guy was called g of x, right? G of x was the original. And it said x squared minus 2 times f of x, right? That was the original, right? So if I'm going to plug in -2, I'm going to do the same thing. I got to plug in -2 everywhere. Okay, so I can simplify this guy right here. Where is it? Right here, I can simplify. So -2 squared is 4, minus 2 is 2. F of 2, I got to go to my table. Or sorry, -2, f of -2 is -1. And I get -2. G of -2 is -2. Which makes a +2 when I plug in, and I'm done. Okay. All right. Okay, let's take a look at this one. Okay, so this one. So what's the big difference between this one and the ones we've done in the past? The obvious difference. What's an obvious difference between this problem and the problems you've seen before? Exactly. They give us a graph. Is a graph kind of like a table? Right? what is a table? A table is, so let's go to this table here, the big table in number 5. X values, right? So they give you X values. And then what are these guys over here? G of X, F of X, F prime, G prime. What are those values? What's another word for those? Like when you have this guy here, F of X equals X squared plus blah, 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 blah. What's another thing I can change this to what? To Y, right? So these are a bunch of Y's, right? These are a bunch of Y's. So I have a bunch of X's and a bunch of Y's. I could plot each of those guys and make a graph. I could plot F of X. I could plot all of these 1, 5, 2, 4, 3, 3, 4, 2, 5, 1, 6, 2, and I could do the same for all of them. And it would give me 4 different graphs, right? Down here, they did the same thing. They're only giving you 2 graphs though. That's all, just 2 graphs, an F graph and a G graph. Okay, so we have to figure out what, we're going to do. Okay, so given the graphs of F of X and G of X, find H of X. H of X is F divided by G. Determine H prime of F. What do you think the first step is I'm going to do? What do you think the first step? Just the first step. I don't want the answer, just the first step. What do you think the first step is? It doesn't involve the graphs, I'll tell you that. It's kind of the first step we've been doing. What's the first step? Find the derivative. Okay, so find the derivative right now. Find me H prime. Find me H prime. What is that going to look like? Tell me what that's going to look like. I'm not looking for an answer. Just tell me what that's going to look like. Okay, so let's see, low D high minus high D low over low squared, right? That was the derivative. We've done that before. Actually, we did it before for the earlier problems, right? Then what did we do next? What do you think we're going to do next with the problem? So look at the question. We found the derivative. What do you think the next step is going to be? In solving the problem. And solving and answering the question. Again, still doesn't involve a graph yet. What do you think the next question is going to be? Plug in 4. So everywhere I see an X, let's plug in 4. So everywhere I see an X, we've done so far everything's the same. So far everything on here, it's not X. What? Done everything, right? So now we're going to go back and use the graph. Okay, but the thing is we're running low on time and I don't want to get into it, and you know, so what we're going to do here is we're going to pause right here, because this step is stuff we've done before. After this is the new stuff. So I want to take time to do that. So we're going to do that tomorrow. Okay, so don't lose this. We're going to finish that. And then the second half of class, I'll give you some time to start on your assignment. Okay, so this is the only new thing we'll have tomorrow, finishing this question. Okay.